Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dan Gheesling. Welcome to the next episode of the podcast. This is episode 59. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, no matter where you're dialing in from, maybe in a deli in Skokie, Illinois, maybe walking up to Anchorage, Alaska on a unicycle. Either way, thank you guys for tuning in. Excited to jump into this episode. It's an update episode, but there's a lot that's been going on. The first and foremost thing I want to jump into right away is taking things a little more seriously. We preemptively talked about it last week. In particular, I think for the first time in a long time, or any time, I had a calendar for social media, and it was an aggressive calendar. Nonetheless, it essentially, I'll give you the brass tacks of it as succinctly as possible, is that I had a couple things that I wanted to talk about on Instagram. And story-wise, Instagram stories, in case you're unfamiliar with it, they're at the top of Instagram. They essentially disappear within 24 hours. So a little bit more, it's like a micro content type thing. And I took it way more serious than I ever have in terms of consistency and what I wanted to talk about for the first time ever. And for example, say Mondays I focused on talking about the podcast. Tuesdays I focused on talking about the live stream. Wednesday was YouTube, or whatever the order was. I was shocked at the results because, in my opinion, my expectations were very slim to none. You know, it's kind of what I head into it with. It's like, hey, just see what happens. Because, and just in theory for me, is just by doing it more consistently. When I say more consistently, what does that mean? It meant the days that I set out to do it, I had anywhere between 10 and 20 stories posted, so pieces of content, and for the day. And I'd never done that before. Normally, I think maybe max would be like 5, 6, maybe. Because it was kind of like I never really knew what to post, or never really took the time to take a step back and say, hey, this is what needs to be posted. And so I was just shocked with the results because, for all intents and purposes, and I didn't do it all 7 days. It was a really aggressive schedule. I think I did probably 4.5 days. Essentially, not the engagement, but the views, the reach of it doubled, which makes absolutely very little sense to me whatsoever, because here's why, and I can't argue with the results. I think there's roughly 65,000 people that follow me on Instagram, and I don't know, I don't think much about the number, but my average stories got a couple thousand views previously. Now it was double that. But the thing that doesn't make sense to me is that there's more people viewing them. It's not like it automatically just, didn't jump to 120,000 people following me on Twitter. I was a little bit just surprised. I didn't expect that to happen. I don't know what I expected, but that was definitely not it. So it was kind of like and what does that mean? Do I care about the views? No. What I care about is that, a couple things. Number one, people that like to see behind the scenes, or like to see stuff that, on Instagram, or something that they may normally not know about or forget about, that they have the ability to do that. But it's more of just like, some people don't know I have a podcast. Some people don't know the story. What I focused on the past week was just kind of talking about each of the things. I showed what went into creating a YouTube video, everything from selecting the game to recording it to the thumbnail to down everything. I just showed, hey, this is what it looks like. And it really kind of peeled back the curtain, because it's really helped me as a piece of content. Or, you guys, I talk from time to time about the one podcast I listen to, is the Gary Vee podcast. He talks about documenting and not creating. So instead of like trying to come up with something unique to say or anything like that, I just showed what I physically do. And a lot of people were like, yo, that's really cool that we get a chance to see that, and I've put it on the flip side too, because I like seeing that stuff from, people, whether friends or people that I follow online. I like seeing that. It's like, you don't want to say it's how you see the sausage being made, but kind of. Get a chance to see things in a different light than you normally do. And I've always felt that way, because that's just how I like to consume things. I like to see things that, aren't necessarily super polished, but are more real. But I have never really taken the time or the effort or really it's just the effort to do that. And it's more so the planning than the execution. The execution was a little bit easier than I thought, but the planning is the hard thing. And that's what I get I got a couple areas that I need to work on, but I think I've identified the number one greatest area of meaning if I can get better at this, I think it'll have the greatest impact, including with, social media and staying ahead of the game and things like that, is I have this new planner. And by new planner, it's just the re-upped one that I use. I think it's called like the Phoenix Journal or Phoenix Planner. It's on Amazon. And the number one thing I know I can do to be more effective and kind of move the needle is to plan my day the day before. It's night and day. And when I do that, good things happen. When I don't, it's like helter skelter. So that's kind of the thing I know that I'm self-aware enough to focus on. And it's just, I don't like to use the word discipline, but I think it's just being more thoughtful about doing that, because it's crazy to see when you know what you need to do, and you have the ability to kind of sit down and do it and make it a priority, then kind of good things work out in that regard, whether, it's social media or whatever it is that you're working on, whatever you want to focus on, being a little bit more thoughtful for me in terms of how I spend my day, and more importantly, that I don't waste time of the same day planning for that day. Because at that point, you're kind of burning daylight. And I think that's the way I look at it, is if you're not planning the night before for the next day, you're burning time what you should be executing, planning. And for me, it's not going super in depth, but just hey, here's the main things that need to get done. And I think it for me, it helps to set the tone as well, in terms of the night before. It's like, all right, hey, when you get up, here's what needs to be done. Here's the time frame you have to do it. So there really isn't as much time to kind of mess around, which has been helpful. Outside of that, the past week, we brought a new thin slice of bread game to the Twitch show. What I mean by that is we brought a linear single-player game back to the show. It's been, I don't know, months and months and months since that had happened. And we played the Messenger DLC. It went really well. I loved how short it was, which may sound really bizarre, but having it, we knocked it out in 2 shows. And it was really fun. I think it was a nice little spark to the community. And I think it was a good reminder to me that sometimes I get so, I don't want to say so entrenched, but sometimes I get so dialed in staying in a lane, you kind of forget that, hey, playing a single player game is a lane in its own right. And so it was a nice reminder for me that people enjoy that, and the community enjoys that, and to not totally stray away from that for the sake of staying in a lane, which is something that I always battle with, and that relates to YouTube. YouTube's going really well right now in terms of Mario Maker and Tetris are both doing well. But I had a Tarkov video this past week that didn't go well. I did a top memes in Tarkov video. And it's, I talk about not having expectations, but I did have expectations for that video. I'm like, oh, this should probably do pretty well. And pretty well for the channel right now would be somewhere around 3,000 views. And this one hit about 1,200 views. And it's kind of back to the Tarkov prophecy where it's like, I know that it's not Tarkov doesn't work on the channel. It's just the videos that I'm making. I thought this one would be unique enough and open enough to get people to dial in, but it just wasn't the case. So for me, it's one of those things I cross off the list and kind of go down next on the list of creative things to try out in terms of Tarkov videos. Other thing that's been interesting in the past week is that there's a couple, I don't say big L's, but definitely a couple micro losses. One of which was I had a co-op sponsored stream with Northern Line set up ready to go, and it fell apart at the last minute, not due to, I don't want to get into too much details about it, but it had nothing to do with Ryan, but more so with the game. And I don't want to get into super details of it, but what I thought was going to be attainable within the game was not ready. And so as a result, I had to cancel it. And a couple reasons it happens and things like that. But two things that bother me about doing that is, one, I had announced it because I thought it was pretty much a done deal and I didn't have all the information. So I don't like to say that something's going to happen and then it not happen. And the second thing is, there was some planning involved, with Ryan, and I don't like essentially putting my name on something, say, hey, this is going to happen, then all of a sudden it doesn't happen. Because to me, it's important, and Ryan's a friend and he's super cool about all that stuff. But, when I say I'm going to do something, I follow through on it or make sure it's going to happen, because I just don't do that stuff very often. So that was definitely a micro loss, and it just was, it kind of, I don't know what the thing is though, I don't know what I could have done differently, right? I got some information late from the game developer that something was supposed to be ready that wasn't. So it's kind of one of those things, just a micro loss, but nothing I'm beating myself up over. It just is what it is. The other thing that was another micro loss this past week was, as a result, I wanted to, since that show was canceled or the sponsor stream was canceled, I never like taking something away from the community or changing something up on the community without replacing it with something equally as good, or, just saying, oh, there's no supper for you tonight. It's like, oh no, we got, I know you're expecting, grilled hamburgers. I'd like to walk in the door with a pizza instead. But one of the interesting things about Twitch is that we've been experimenting with it, and I need to really get with Zane, the editor, and talk to him more about this. But over the past couple months, we talked about it here on the podcast, was that we're going to try running reruns on Twitch. And I think we're on like the third or fourth game. So it's been running for about 4 months. And essentially it's like where the Twitch channel is live, meaning there's content like on the channel, but it's a rerun, so I'm not actually live. And where we're at with that is so what happened this past week, because we're working on a schedule on that. Zane has everything kind of preloaded for that. Because the sponsor deal was canceled, I wanted to go live earlier. But one of the features of Twitch, or I guess you could say lack of features, is once you go live with a video, there's no way to take it down, which is really kind of strange. But also I understand, because VOD content or not live content isn't Twitch's specialty. But it's the second time that happened. So essentially what that means is I wanted to go live and I physically couldn't go live. I even, tried to reach out to the partner manager reached out. I have a friend, Dylan, who works at Twitch, and there just was nothing they could do to essentially take the stream down. But it's brought it back to the forefront in my mind in terms of, okay, hey, I think it's now time to sit back and evaluate. Did running reruns on the channel, is that a good thing or a bad thing? How can we make it better? And we've got some ideas, and really what I think we're going to focus on there is that right now what we're doing is we're playing old we're playing old YouTube playthroughs on Twitch. And when I say old, I mean like super old, like from 2014 to 2015. And then we evolved into replaying Dark Souls on the show, which was it was viewed maybe 2.5 years ago on Twitch. So what I think the next play is, and kind of what I've been thinking about, is to make it as easy as possible for someone on Twitch to watch something they maybe normally have never seen on Twitch. So what I think that's going to result in, or our next test is going to be taking a chunk of YouTube videos that have never been before seen on Twitch and bringing those to over in a multi-hour format. I think that's the next thing we're going to try out and just see how it goes. And it may end up where playing, I don't know. My real thoughts on it is that I don't see, outside of vanity metrics that may or may not hurt deals down the road, which I don't really care about. Outside of vanity metrics, I think it's a good thing. And what I mean by vanity metrics is that because the channel is live, but we're not live, there's no distinction in the amount of views, right? So typically what you get at the end of the month, or you can look at it anytime on Twitch, is you get an average, hey, you have an average number of, people that watch the show. And I think us on a show is somewhere between 300 and 400. But because we go live, we run the reruns, those numbers essentially count against the show. So our real, quote unquote, real numbers that show up on Twitch, something that you would maybe share with someone that wants to do a sponsored deal with you, are like 250 or 265 are your average views on your analytics report, which to me, I don't really care about. I really don't. Because the way I look at it, I'd say that's the downside of it, but it's such a minuscule downside from a number reporting standpoint. But for me, the upside is, the way I look at it is a couple things. One, it gives the people, the community that comes to the channel Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, a place for everyone to hang out, whether they've seen the video or not. Also, in addition, it's another at bat for new people to find the channel. Sure, it's not live, and sure, it may not be the best representation of the show at the time, but it's another at bat without having essentially to be live. And not that I have a problem with going live, but it's not feasible to be live 24 hours a day in theory in terms of live content. But it could get to a point where it is feasible in terms of having something on the show 24 hours a day. That is not the goal. But it's also interesting because, without getting into names or anything, there's an individual who had a really, I'd say, really unique take on that. And in the month of October, just let his show run 24 hours a day, or for the most part 24 hours a day, of horror content. And I always saw that as like a really cool thing, and I think it did pretty well. But there was a theme to it, and I don't know. I just think my thing is always zigging and zagging, right? If no one's doing something, or not a lot of people are doing it yet, it's either because it's too new and it hasn't popped off yet, which is a good thing, or it doesn't work, so no one's doing it. And I just feel like there is something in my heart of hearts. I feel like there is something that there's a way to do it right, to have your channel be live, not 24 hours a day, but have your channel be live a lot of the time, where it's still an enjoyable thing for people. People get value from it, and the community gets value from it. So I haven't quite figured it out, but it's one of the things that I think is fairly important moving forward, and to continue to tinker with that. It's just like everything else you guys hear me talk about. I don't know what I'm doing, right? I had no idea the Instagram story stuff would work. I just do it and see what happens. And if it works, we do more of it. And if not, then you stop doing it. It's over time, I think, the podcast is all about just peeling the curtain back. And if you've been listening for a while, you probably noticed a pattern. It's like, hey, Dan thinks he has an idea of what's going on, really doesn't, tries things, and then kind of figures it out, right? You never really know what's going on. You just try to do your best and do things and create things, and if it works, do more. If it doesn't work, don't do it. The Messenger DLC, the random game that we played, it's not really a random game, but it could have been a complete flop, and people were upset. It wasn't. But bottom line is, you don't know until you try, and I think that'll be a recurring theme, and it has been a recurring theme throughout the podcast, and I think it'll always happen, because that's just how things operate, at least on my end of things. Outside of that, I guess a personal thing. You may have heard me talk from time to time. I've been doing this running challenge. I run 5 days a week, 2 miles every day. And I've been doing it now for probably close to 60 weeks. And on Saturday is about the closest I've ever come to just kind of bending the knee and saying, look, I got to the point this week where I had to run Saturday and Sunday to keep it alive. And I was so close. Friday, I was just really, really spent physically and just mentally. And so Saturday, I was just drained. And I walked in my head, I'm like, this, and I told myself, I'm like, this is the closest. Like, I could not run, and like, I would feel good. But I started talking to myself internally. I'm like, all right, you've been going for close to 60 weeks. It's going to take 20 minutes of your life to do this. Is the trade-off worth it? Meaning, if I don't go running, is the trade-off for those 20 minutes that I'm sacrificing, even though I'm really tired, is it worth essentially throwing 60 weeks down the window? Because I was just tired. It wasn't because something unplanned happened or whatever. It just, like, I just didn't feel like it. And ultimately, that was enough to kind of get me up, which made it interesting for me, because there's a little bit of fear in me, like, that, hey, if you take this, if you ruin this week by not going 5 days, all of a sudden the next week becomes a little bit easier to do that as well, because your year streak, or your year and a half streak, or your 60-week streak went down the road. So I kind of just, I did like a if and analysis, like, if this happens, how are you going to feel, and what are you going to do about it? And ultimately, that was what kind of pushed me out the door. And I think I went at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and So the reason I share with it for you is I think there's a lot to be said for momentum and keeping a streak alive within reason. And I know at some point it'll end. It won't be my entire life. But Saturday was not that day. Saturday 100% was not that day. Other new stuff this past week, we brought the new Borderlands game to Unity, Team Unity. Myself, Ryan, Gary, Austin, and Michael A. Fox played some Borderlands 3. I think that went pretty well. It was a fun game. I was surprised how much it was fun to play a game where you literally don't think. All you do is shoot. And most of the games we play, there's an element of difficulty and some thinking to it, not DAE logical stuff, but you gotta, like in Borderlands, all you do is just shoot. And I think it was fun. It was a nice change up, and I think it's what we needed. We needed. I think it was things were getting a little bit stale, and we needed a spark. And I think it's a good spark, and I'm excited to continue playing through it. I will say that this past week, I tweeted something about trying to understand, or I wanted to understand both viewpoints on the Epic Game Store, and there's a mini episode about that if you missed that, but I don't think in recent history I've never had so much banter and people get involved in a conversation online more so than asking people to share their opinions on the Epic Game Store. I just, it is a red hot topic, and I thought it was like pretty, not controversial, but pretty people had some strong opinions about it. But man, it's like one of those expectations where I just couldn't believe it. It was just like threads and threads of paragraphs on Twitter, and there's a lot of passion out there, and one of the things that made me think is that I really need to be mindful of when I am asking for opinion, making sure that it's worth it, because and I really also kind of dialed it back too, because I wanted to give my honest opinion about it, and without rehashing it, it's essentially I think competition is a good thing, while also admitting that I don't know the full story. That's just my general thoughts on it, but I for a second I worried about alienating some members of the community by posting my opinion about that or sharing it. But at the same time, I'm like, well, if people are going to be alienated by that opinion about a video game store, then they probably don't understand, maybe not understand how I operate, because I'm trying to have a discussion about it, not necessarily judge or bash other opinions on it. And I think, and I don't, it was kind of one of those, I don't want to call it a nonsensical thought, because that's not the right word, but a thought that I had that may not be founded in any reality, meaning that no one really said anything. And it's kind of one of those things, sometimes you psych yourself out about doing something or sharing something when in reality, like, no one cares. It's like, my thing is, as long as you're respectful of other people's opinions, which I believe I am, I think at the end of the day, most people are going to understand that. Another surprising thing this past week was we brought some Tetris 99 back to the channel, and to me, it's like it was like a sleeping bear. You just don't know what people want to see until you put it out there. And Tetris has done really well on the channel. And I don't know, YouTube's is another unique spot right now, because things are going really well. I think it's just from the last time we talked about YouTube, like back in the day, things are just going really well, but they still feel a little disjointed. And I don't know what the answer is. I want to be posting Tarkov stuff, but like I said, the one I tried this week didn't work out. So hopefully at this point, what I'm going to say next is just run some more things up the flagpole and see what happens. But outside of that, I do want to invite you guys, if you haven't already, you know what? I'm going to hit you with this. I think we've talked about it maybe once, but as we wrap up this episode, I would like for you to text me your opinion on this podcast. Did you like it? Did you not like it? What do you like about the podcast? Who is a guest you would like to see? Text me at 313-509-1979. 313-509-1979. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next week.